I'm pregnant with David's child. It's due soon. You need to leave him.
My sister's sudden words as she barged into my house left me more dumbfounded than shocked. How could she be having an affair with my husband, and on top of that, boast about being pregnant? I never expected her to be so shameless.
It's your own fault for not getting pregnant. You brought this on yourself.
You're defective for being infertile.
My sister and David looked down on me and laughed. Seeing them cozy up to each other only made my disgust grow.
There's such a huge difference between us sisters.
I was too stunned to speak. The way David looked at me was chilling.
I'm getting remarried, so let's get divorced.
If that's what you want, fine. I'll divorce you. But are you sure it's really David's child, considering? After my sister and David left, I was left alone. But being alone allowed me to think deeply.
Actually, about that.
Things were getting interesting. Just wait and see. I'll make sure they pay for what they did to me. My name is Mary Johnson. I married David, who is the VP at my workplace and the CEO's son, when I was 30. My father-in-law, James, and my mother-in-law, Lisa, were very kind to me even when I was just an employee, and it was through their introduction that I got married. My parents also blessed our marriage, and my relationships with everyone around us were good. I continued working at the same place after our marriage, and everything seemed to be going smoothly when we were newlyweds. I never imagined I would be plunged into such misery later on. David, who was kind at first, completely changed after we got married. David, if you're going to be home late, at least let me know beforehand.
Huh? Why do I need to let you manage my schedule? I'll do whatever I want.
But I need to prepare dinner.
Shut up. Don't tell me what to do. You're the one doing everything on your own.
He says that, but he'll get mad if dinner isn't ready when he wants it. I sighed as I watched David storm out, yelling. Soon after our marriage, David started spending money recklessly. He would abandon his work responsibilities, leaving everything to his subordinates while he went out to play around. He claimed to be on business trips, but he was out every night and often came home in the morning.
I thought he'd settle down after starting his career, but his true colors are showing.
What do you mean?
I went to the same college as him. He was notorious for partying hard and having multiple girlfriends at the same time. It got so bad that the CEO got angry with him. I heard he almost got disowned. People thought he had grown up a bit and became serious after that.
I was too shocked to speak. I could feel my voice trembling as I managed to ask. Really? I had no idea. The colleague who told me nodded several times.
When he joined the company, he was really serious. Everyone thought he had gotten himself together after being told off. That's why the CEO made him little VP.
I see.
Well, Mary, you have a good reputation here. That's probably why he got comfortable. He thinks he can take over the company now.
In reality, David's reputation was deteriorating. There were even voices saying he should be fired and the current executive should be promoted to VP.
That guy disrespected me again. He should know his place.
David constantly complained about the executive when he was home. Since the executive was my direct boss, I felt uncomfortable.
Why is my wife working under that guy?
I'm in the accounting department. When I timidly responded to his yelling, David clearly didn't like it. He banged on the wall, making a loud noise.
Shut up. Don't talk back. Get him fired. You've got plenty of ways to do that since you work with him.
That's impossible. He's a decent person.
You're my wife. Don't you dare side with him.
David just complained and showed no effort to improve. Moreover, he hadn't contributed a single penny to the household since we got married. I managed everything with my salary. While I'm managing now with a full-time job, I'm worried about the future. Hey, could you at least contribute a little to the household? Just for groceries and utilities.
Why should I give you my money? You work too, don't you?
That's not fair. We're married. At least split the living expenses with me. I felt like it was the first time I pushed back so much against David's anger. I was really struggling, paying for all the groceries and utilities myself. I couldn't support a household meant for two on my own. But David didn't understand. He probably didn't even want to understand. To him, I was just a prop to inherit the company.
So, you married me just for my money, huh?
That's not true. I just can't maintain the lifestyle you want on my income alone. I'm just asking you to help.
Shut up. This is why I hate poor people. You make me sick. Don't show your face for a while.
Talking to him was pointless. But I was reluctant to talk to my in-laws. They were good people, and I didn't want to worry them or strain our relationship because of David. They were as important to me as my own parents. Besides, if they scolded David, he'd take it out on me. I didn't want that either. We live in a house that my in-laws built for us. They only provided the money, leaving the house decisions up to David and me. Back then, he was still reasonable, and we had fun discussing and deciding on things together. Now, it feels like a distant memory. But to repay my in-laws for their kindness, I'll try a little harder. I renewed my resolve and headed to work. 3 years passed as I endured David, remembering my in-laws' kindness. David's behavior only worsened, and he became a well-known spendthrift. He even boasted about not contributing to the household money when out drinking. Because of that, people said I was weak for not controlling my husband or pitted me for being stuck with a loser. I felt so uncomfortable, even when shopping, as if people were gossiping about me. Some employees also looked down on me for not keeping David in check.
Why let your husband do whatever he wants? I'd never stand it if I were you.
Maybe she's afraid of divorce. Staying quiet might make her the CEO's wife someday.
If that spoiled brat becomes CEO, the CEO's wife would practically run the company.
That'd be a takeover. Scary, coming from someone so mild-mannered.
Even if I complained to David, he'd just yell. If he became CEO, the employees would certainly suffer, so they directed their frustration and anxiety at me.
Mary, you look pale. Are you okay?
Oh, James. Yes, I'm fine.
If you have any problems, feel free to talk to me.
Yes, thank you. My in-laws also subtly showed their concern for me, but I still couldn't bring myself to discuss David with them. I thought I could endure a bit longer, but postponing the conversation only made me feel guilty, as if I were hiding something. I couldn't explain my situation well, and I ended up becoming distant from my in-laws. The uncomfortable distance between us made my heart ache. They were really good people, but because of me, they had painful expressions on their faces.
Playing the good girl again, huh?
Does she really want to be the CEO's wife that badly, even with a husband like that?
Maybe the spoiled brat was right about her being a gold digger. After all, they built her a house too.
Work became a place where I felt out of place. Going to the office became increasingly depressing. The only saving grace was my direct boss, Bob, who treated me very neutrally. David hated Bob, but he always dealt with me professionally, even though I felt out of place. With my in-laws distant and rumors surrounding me, his straightforward attitude was a relief.
Mary, can you make copies of these documents?
Yes, Bob.
She's such a people pleaser, trying to get on both the little VP and executive's good sides.
She's probably hedging her bets for whoever becomes CEO.
Oh, what an ambitious woman.
I'm just doing my job. No matter what they say, I'm just working. I'm not doing anything wrong. No matter how many times I tell myself that, my hands still tremble. After a while, I heard that my in-laws told David, "We can't let you take over the company if this continues." David, red-faced and furious, was the one who informed me.
It's your fault. They're saying this because you haven't had a child yet.
I couldn't understand how it came to this. How could we have a child when he was coming home at dawn every day? Why is it about that? They just want you to take your job seriously.
You think I'm not working? Don't be ridiculous. I'm busier and contributing more to the company than you. I earn more than you, so you can't understand my job.
Once David got like this, there was no stopping him. All I could do was wait for him to exhaust his tantrum. David kept yelling at me as I shrugged and waited for the storm to pass.
It's your fault. We need a son. Get fertility treatments or whatever, and give me an heir.
But
Don't talk back.
when David started throwing things like a spoiled child, I crouched down, protecting my head to avoid getting hurt. Okay, I'll get fertility treatments. Will you cooperate?
Why should I do that when it's your fault? You're the one with the issues. Don't mock me.
David's tantrums scared me, but I also felt a deep sense of exhaustion and disbelief. Why did I have to endure this? My in-laws probably scolded David for my sake, but it seemed to backfire. But no one could predict that he would act like this. Agreeing with him would calm him down for the moment. I gave up everything and became David's puppet. A year after starting fertility treatments, the test results showed that there were no abnormalities or issues with my body, and that I was capable of getting pregnant. The doctor suggested that the issue might be with David, but he stubbornly refused to get tested. David sometimes took his frustration out on things, so neither the doctor nor I could insist. David, whose own infertility was suggested, told me to see another doctor, but the results were the same wherever I went, and it only made him more irritable. Could you come to the doctor with me just once? There might be something we're missing. I had been too afraid of David's mood to ask before, but one day, I decided to plead humbly.
I'm busy. I don't have time to deal with your shortcomings.
But without your cooperation, we can't proceed with IVF. My eggs are fine, so we need to move to the next step. I hate to take your time, but could you help just once? It seemed that saying it was for my infertility treatment, rather than David's test, was the right move. Though he frowned a bit, he glared at me, watching my reaction.
You're paying for this treatment, right?
Of course. It's my responsibility. I'll handle it.
All right. In that case, I suppose I can go.
His arrogance was infuriating, but I managed to get David to the hospital. He always talked about money, making it hard to tell who the real gold digger was. But seeing me eager to have his child seemed to improve his mood. He loved being the center of attention. No matter how old he gets, he's always childish and immature. Even at the hospital, he reluctantly followed the doctor's instructions and then left without waiting for the doctor's explanation. I ended up listening to the doctor's explanation alone, feeling utterly lost. Given his behavior, I wasn't surprised by what happened next.
Long time no see, Mary.
Susan, what are you doing here? One day, my sister Susan suddenly visited my house. Seeing her proudly smiling with her large belly, I had a bad feeling. Susan had always been irresponsible, living at home without working until recently. She stopped visiting our parents when I married David. At first, my parents worried, but they eventually gave up, thinking she was probably living with a boyfriend again. I never imagined she'd end up pregnant. She looked like she was due any day.
I'm pregnant with David's child. It's due soon. You need to leave him.
They must have planned this. David, unusually at home, put his arm around Susan and sneered at me.
Susan's right. We don't need a wife who can't get pregnant. I stayed with you to keep face with my parents, but I've had enough.
You're spending all this money on treatments and still can't get pregnant. David's really bothered by it.
Susan laughed triumphantly while David looked down on me. Seeing them together, I felt more disgusted than angry.
Really, it's been frustrating that you can't get pregnant.
You're defective for being infertile.
It's shocking how easily they could say such hurtful things. Their only goal was to wound me.
We don't need someone like you.
I'm getting remarried, so let's get divorced.
I couldn't find the words. I knew David was unfaithful, but I never imagined he'd cheat with my sister. I'd noticed Susan acting overly friendly when I introduced David to her, but I never thought it would go this far. All right. I'll make the preparations, so please wait a bit. Thinking I had given in, Susan and David looked pleased. What drives them to this? I never did anything to harm or spite them, yet they hated me enough to do this.
Hurry up. Stress is bad for the baby.
If you have any decency, you'd pack your things and leave to give your sister and husband a fresh start.
Hearing the word decency from David was astonishing. Being lectured on morals and common sense by these people was the ultimate humiliation.
Actually, could you leave now? There's no point in staying if you can't have kids. Go back to your parents. They coddle you, so they'll treat you well even if you're useless.
Susan's words made my blood boil. My parents had always supported my quiet, studious nature. But they'd also cherished Susan, despite her irresponsible lifestyle, scolding and worrying about her constantly. I never thought my parents' love was unequal. In fact, I often felt that my rebellious sister and I, who was considered a model student, were treated so equally that I wondered if I was less loved. So what is she talking about? I suppressed the urge to yell and tried to stay calm. It will take some time to pack my things and explain the situation to everyone. Please wait a little longer. When I pretended to be dejected, Susan and David were very pleased. Especially Susan, who couldn't hide the smirk on her face despite her feigned annoyance. She seemed to enjoy tormenting me.
I don't want to see your depressing face.
David followed Susan's exaggerated high-pitched voice.
It would be terrible if my Susan and the baby got sick. We'll get a hotel for tonight. Get out quickly, okay?
They left after saying whatever they wanted. This house was bought by my in-laws. They must have wanted their son to be responsible. And they must have cherished him. Both my parents were worried about my sister. These two had trampled on everyone's feelings. I'll get my revenge, definitely. If that's what they want, fine. I'll divorce him. I wanted a divorce too, so that part is welcome. But I will never let those two be happy. Just wait and see. I'll make them pay. I prepared myself. I moved out of the house quickly, but I delayed the divorce process with various excuses. During that time, I actively gathered evidence and prepared for my revenge. Susan's belly was very large, so she would give birth while I prepared. Their lack of planning led to this. Giving birth out of wedlock would be tough, but they didn't seem to realize it. They pestered me to divorce quickly, but there was no sense of urgency. They were truly ridiculous. I don't mind if they suffer, but is it really David's child? I mean, considering. With this thought, I decided to consult my in-laws. They had already talked to me after being informed by David, so it was timely. The preparations were complete. Now, I just needed to make them see hell. A month passed quickly, and I received news that Susan had given birth.
Why did you come here? You still haven't divorced David, you clingy woman.
Susan scowled when I entered the hospital room. Her smirk indicated that she enjoyed insulting me. David also glared at me aggressively, following Susan's lead.
I don't know what you told my parents, but we're not related anymore. Stop meddling. I got scolded because of you.
That's because of your outrageous behavior. But it's pointless to say that.
I wonder if my sister is stalking you.
That's troublesome, especially since I have you, Susan.
They are truly pathetic. I held back a sigh, trying to keep my emotions in check. Congratulations on the baby. My words only made Susan and David look at me with disdain. Their attitude won't last long.
Excuse us.
First of all, congratulations on the birth.
My in-laws entered the hospital room. Following them were my parents.
Sorry for barging in with so many people.
We have something to talk about. Things are about to get a bit chaotic.
Susan and David, confident in their victory, sneered at me.
Mom, Dad. Finally, a grandchild is born. Isn't it wonderful?
Lisa, James, please hold the baby.
Susan, already trying to such up to my in-laws, spoke in an exaggerated sweet tone. My in-laws' faces were stern, and my parents spoke on their behalf.
Susan, we have spoiled you too much. We never imagined you would treat your own sister this way. We thought we would always be on your side, but we can't anymore. You are no longer welcome in our home. You are disowned.
My mother started crying at my father's words.
I told you countless times to be considerate of others, but it was in vain.
What is this?
Susan's eyes widened in shock at the sudden declaration of disownment.
I can't believe you'd say that to me after I gave birth to your grandchild. I don't want to be part of a family of poor people like you.
David sided with Susan. He placed a hand on her shoulder and glared at my parents.
How rude. To speak like that to your daughter who just gave birth. I can't forgive you, even if you're her parents.
Then he turned to Susan and said proudly,
I'll protect you.
Oh, David.
Lost in their own world, they were completely self-absorbed. After all the care they received, Susan calling her own parents poor was unbelievable. My parents, probably more shocked than I was, showed no signs of being shaken, perhaps already resigned to the situation. Maybe there had been conflicts between Susan and my parents that I didn't know about, and they had already given up on her long ago.
You act as if it doesn't concern you, but you're disowned too. You won't inherit the company, and you're fired effective today. Don't ever show your face again.
What? What's going on?
James's words made David shout angrily. Susan turned pale and started trembling. After all the effort to achieve their position, it was now crumbling away. I struggled not to laugh at their frantic reactions.
I'm the only heir. We even have a grandchild now. Doesn't that secure our family's future?
What century are you living in?
My in-laws were exasperated at David's words. He looked like he was about to cling to them. Susan, still not fully understanding the situation, just looked back and forth between David and my in-laws in a panic.
If you had been competent, I would have let you take over the company, but it was a mistake to make you VP. The company will be entrusted to a reliable subordinate.
What? This is ridiculous.
David's temper finally exploded, his shouts echoing through the room. But James and Lisa, accustomed to this, didn't even flinch.
I already talked about how I'd become CEO. This can't be allowed.
That was your own assumption. We never agreed.
Lisa, who had been quietly standing by, now faced David with a firm stance.
It seems you've borrowed money claiming you'd become CEO, but you'll have to find a job and pay it back yourself. We can't support you anymore.
No way.
Considering David's lifestyle, it wasn't surprising he had debts. As the VP, he should be making a decent salary, but his love for flashy things and women probably made it impossible for his salary to cover everything. Apparently, he had been secretly buying cars and condos behind our backs, so who knows how much debt he had. Finally, Susan seemed to grasp the situation and turned her angry glare at David, abandoning her previously submissive attitude.
This isn't what we agreed on. What's going on? Why do you think I had a child?
But David wasn't paying attention to that. He was too busy yelling at his parents.
You said if I had a child, I'd have to prove the bloodline. I even took the test. What was that all for?
Susan's face turned pale. She must have realized the test was bad news.
What is this? I didn't know anything about the test.
Susan's shrill voice made David frown. He glared at her, clearly irritated. Their earlier camaraderie now seemed like a lie.
What's the big deal? It's my kid, so there shouldn't be any problem. Stop being hysterical. I'm busy here, so shut up.
Actually, about that.
The doctor my father had called entered the room, looking troubled. A friend of James, he had agreed to help with our plan for revenge.
Susan, your child is not related to David by blood.
What?
The room fell silent for a moment. Susan gasped, and David broke out in a cold sweat. The doctor's words turned both their faces pale. I decided this was the moment to pull out the photos I had hidden in my bag.
What's this?
Hey, what is that?
The photos showed Susan. There were dozens of pictures of her with different men. Some photos showed couples entering hotels, with the woman consistently being Susan, while the men were not just David. Though she had stopped dating once her belly grew, I had gathered these from her ex-boyfriend who had hired a detective to investigate her infidelity. I had paid him for the investigation results. Her ex-boyfriend, who was dumped when she got pregnant, hired a detective. I also have statements from him and other partners if you want. David glared at Susan with a murderous look. Even though he looked like a victim now, he too would see hell. And remember when you came with me to the hospital for the fertility treatments? I have those test results too.
What? I don't know about any tests.
There are tests that you have to do before an IVF. That's standard procedure. The doctor tried to explain and stopped David at that time. But he ignored the doctor and left on his own. His selfish actions cornered him and led to this situation. He had only himself to blame. Your sperm motility is very low. The doctor said you're almost certainly infertile. If you don't believe me, look at the test results.
No way.
David's reaction was more satisfying than I imagined. He turned pale and snatched the test results from me with trembling hands. He kept rereading them, sweat trickling down his face. His lips quivered, and he looked like he might collapse. The DNA test also showed the child isn't yours. The father is likely one of the men in the photos. I told David, who was in shock over his infertility. He shoved the test results back at me and started yelling at Susan.
You lied to me, you slut.
But Susan wasn't going to back down.
Shut up. It's your fault you're shooting blanks.
That's not true, you tramp. It's your fault for being a slut.
David, unwilling to accept reality, turned his glare on me. He was busy.
Hey, you must be lying. How can I trust this piece of paper? You're just trying to mess with me because you're bitter about being dumped. You're the defective one.
Defective? Both my in-laws and my parents frowned at his words. David didn't seem to notice or care about the reactions around him. The more he talked, the worse his situation. All my test results from different hospitals showed no issues. If you don't believe me, go get tested at various hospitals yourself.
I don't have time for that nonsense. Enough already.
Finally, James raised his voice.
Enough is enough. Have some shame. You're disgraceful.
Stop disgracing yourself further. Apologize to Mary.
David flinched at his parents' words. His shouting stopped, only for Susan to jump in.
Because of you, my future is ruined. What are you going to do about it?
Shut up, you tramp. That's my line. You tricked me. Take your kid and get lost.
What followed was a horrendous argument that was hard to listen to. Their relationship was built on money. Seeing their true feelings and greed on display, it was embarrassing to watch.
Without your money, you're worthless.
Don't act so high and mighty, you washed-up gold digger.
Both my in-laws and my parents were completely exasperated.
I'm speechless.
How did they turn out like this?
Poor baby.
The child isn't at fault.
I worried about the child too. With such parents, the future seemed bleak, and I doubted they could even raise the child properly. Ignoring our concerns, Susan looked at me. It seemed she cared more about herself than her child's future.
Your bad choices in men ruined my life. What are you going to do about it? Take responsibility.
David grabbed Susan's shoulder. He looked like he was about to start a fight.
What did you say?
Don't touch me, you impotent man.
It was truly ridiculous. I let out a long sigh, releasing all the frustration I had held in. Your actions are your own responsibility. If anyone should take responsibility, it's you too.
Don't joke around. You've always looked down on me. I've hated that look in your eyes since we were kids.
Susan had always looked down on me for living a serious life. Maybe she had her grievances against me and our parents too. What a coincidence. I've always hated your words and actions, constantly mocking me.
What a way to talk. No wonder you got dumped.
This is what they call double standards. Her words made no sense anymore. Talking is a waste of time. Here's the conclusion: I've decided to hold you two responsible. I handed Susan and David the copies of the lawsuit for alimony that I had my lawyer prepare. I have also filed for divorce from David. It would be useless to try to resolve things with these two through conversation, so I resorted to stronger measures. You two are going to pay up. The amount I demanded was small compared to the years of suffering I endured, but it was enough to make both of them furious.
You can't demand alimony from your own sister. That's outrageous.
You gold digger. You'll go to any lengths for money.
I didn't want the money, I just wanted to make them suffer. And this seemed to be the most effective way. Their parents couldn't stand their pathetic outburst any longer and spoke up.
Considering what you did to Mary, it's a small price to pay. You should be grateful it's not more.
You had an affair with your sister's husband, and you think you have the right to complain now? That's disgraceful.
But scolding from their own parents had no effect on these selfish people. Their eyes glared at everyone like the whole world was their enemy. Their wild, hysterical behavior was terrifying to witness, even though I was prepared for it.
If you consider us strangers, then stop pretending to be our parents.
That's right. You have nothing to do with us anymore.
If they had shown any remorse, they might have been forgiven. But they were too foolish for that. They prioritized their own desires and pride, completely blind to the consequences.
Why? Why did it come to this?
David's eyes met mine. I felt a bad premonition. David was faster than I could react. He lunged at me with a murderous look.
Mary, this is all your fault.
Ah.
I screamed. But the impact I expected never came.
Bob, You were here too.
Bob, who had been outside the room, restrained David. James looked down at the grinding David with a sad expression.
We've decided that Bob will take over the company, so you can focus on paying alimony to Mary.
David hated Bob the most. He had always feared that Bob would take over his position. Now that fear had become reality, and David lost his composure. He started thrashing around like a tantrum-throwing child. But Bob, holding him down, didn't budge.
I thought he was a troublemaker, but I never imagined it would be this bad.
Are you all right?
Please take him away quickly.
Soon after, security arrived. They took over from Bob, dragging the struggling David out of the hospital. Only then did David seem to realize his predicament. He broke free and clung to my leg. Seeing his pitiful tear-filled eyes was revolting.
I'm sorry. Don't leave me.
Do you have no pride at all?
Bob said what I wanted to say. He pulled David off me and protectively put his arm around my shoulder. David finally seemed to understand everything.
Damn it. Don't think you can get away with this, you bitch.
I hope to never see him again after he's taken away with those parting words. I just pray that the trial goes smoothly. Susan, left in the hospital room, looked pale when she saw Bob putting his arm around me.
You're seeing someone else too, aren't you?
I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but she has done nothing wrong. I'm the one pursuing her because I'm in love with her.
That made me feel embarrassed. I looked down, wanting to hide my flushed face. My in-laws, parents, and Bob all watched over me warmly. After that, David and Susan were cut off from the family and were left dealing with debts and alimony payments. David intended to marry Susan, but she left him, saying she had no interest in a man without money. She didn't take the baby either, so my parents took the child in and named her Emily. She's a sweet little girl. We had planned to take her in from the start, but seeing my sister abandon her child at the hospital was still shocking. She was never fit to take care of a child. While my parents are the main caregivers, I also help out since I moved back home after divorcing David. I continue to work at my former in-laws' company, and our relationship is good. They also treat Susan's child like their own grandchild. Loved by everyone, she's growing up well. I heard Susan started working in a nightclub to pay the alimony but got addicted to the club scene and disappeared before she could finish paying. David is also struggling with debt and alimony payments and has been abandoned by the women who were after his money. His massive debt and alimony payments seem never-ending, and his creditors are losing patience. People are saying he might disappear like Susan. A few years later, I married Bob. We have 2 children now and are living happily. Come on, we're going to Grandma's house today.
Yay! I'm going to play games with my big sister.
Don't be too demanding with your sister, okay? My relationship with Emily is great, and my children look up to her as their big sister.
Mary, watch your step.
Thanks, dear. Bob has always been kind to me, even after years of marriage. He says he loves my inner strength and takes great care of me. I'm confident that we can overcome anything together and stay happy. I believe it's a reward from above for surviving my ordeal. I love you.
I love you too.
I finally found happiness.